இந்த முக்கியமான ஒரு கூட்டத்திற்கு அழைப்பு தந்து எல்லா ஏற்பாடையும் செய்கிறேன்னு ஒரு வரவேற்பு கொடுத்து உங்களையெல்லாம் இங்கே கூட்டி இந்த அருமையான ஒரு நிகழ்வுக்கு காரணமாக இருக்கும் தான் ஸ்ரீ தத்தோ டாக்டர் பாலன், திரு சரவணன் சின்னப்பன், ஃபாதர் ஜெகத் காஸ்பர், திரு தேவசகாயம் அவர்கள் மற்றும் இந்த குழுவில் பணியாற்றிய எல்லோருக்கும் முதல் என் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். Given the very limited time today, I'll try to speak as fast as I can and make your time useful. First, I welcome all of you to this great meet. I had the good fortune of speaking in Madurai about 6 months ago. And at that time, I gave a speech about employment, demographics, youth, etc. So Father asked me this time that you must also speak about something substantive. It's very hard to get a politician to speak about substantive things for, any length of time. But he also gave me a very broad topic, and the topic is transforming Tamil Nadu into an economic powerhouse for all Tamils through ideas, policies, widespread entrepreneurship, global collaboration and governance. Surely that must be the longest topic for any delegate or any speaker today. But what I'll do instead, let me break this down maybe into 2 or 3 parts. First, as a sitting lawmaker, but also a member of the Public Accounts Committee of the Assembly and somebody who takes a big interest in the budget, let me talk a little bit about the state of Tamil Nadu today. We're a very interesting place. And with some data points, I'll illustrate it is a state of great contrast. The state has serious problems, mostly related to 2 of the topics that the Father has given me, governance and policies. But those are correctable sooner or later through good administration. It also has some problems that are not correctable through government alone. Those are more cultural, behavioral, societal problems. I'll touch on them. And I think through that, I'll come to where you all fit in, where the entrepreneurs like yourselves, both in Tamil Nadu and outside the global diaspora, how you can both find opportunity and have an impact in Tamil Nadu. So, if I start just with the statistics, in Tamil Nadu today, we have statistics that indicate that we are first world, some other statistics and outcomes that suggest we are in the second world or middle income country, and yet other situations that suggest we are actually a very poor country and a poor state. For example, the total fertility rate, or the number of births per woman in Tamil Nadu today is 1.6. That is far below the replacement rate. And it is akin to places like Singapore, Western Europe, other parts of the world that are suffering from a demographic kind of lack of replenishment problem. We also have about the highest gross enrollment ratio in higher education of certainly any state in India, but pretty much close to any country in the world. Roughly 47% of every college-age girl or boy attends college in Tamil Nadu. We have mobile penetration that's close to 100%, and more than in most advanced countries, roughly 70% of Tamil Nadu owns a smartphone, is accessible through a smartphone. We have just come out of an election campaign. I was one of the bigger buyers of advertising space on behalf of the party, my party, the DMK. Google can identify for us 3.9 crore distinct individuals in Tamil Nadu who are online. That is a phenomenal number. It's 60-odd% of the voter database. So in that sense, we are a first world state. In some other sense, we are a middle income state. The GDP for the state is about $250 billion, or about $3,000 per capita, in notional terms, and in PPP terms, it's closer to about $11,000, and it's close to a $900 billion economy. In infrastructure, in terms of intercity highways, or air travel access, or the availability of electricity, we are a middle-income state. And then there are kind of really shameful statistics. If you go out to the rural parts of Tamil Nadu, but even in some parts of urban areas, basic sanitation, access to toilets, access to continuous drinking water is not available. So much like other parts of the world, we have great disparity, but that disparity, thankfully, is limited to few things. Not good things, but few things. And so we are simultaneously a first world state, a second world state, and a third world state. Many of these problems are fixable by the state, by people like us who are elected and whose job it is to go through and correct some of these things. I would say the two biggest problems we have in Tamil Nadu today, apart from politics, because though I am a politician, I'm not here as one. The two biggest problems we have are a lack of governance and poor policy making. And I say this independent of politics. I'm just going to give you based on statistics. The first lack of governance is about financial misadministration. In 2003, the government of India enacted a law called the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, and they forced every state to enact that law. And that law has greatly improved the finances of India and its states. It has kept debt to GDP under control. It has kept revenue deficits under control, by and large. In Tamil Nadu, we were having a really, really good run. From 2003 till about 2014, the debt to interest ratio came down, the interest to revenue ratio came down, revenue deficits were close to zero, fluctuated a bit up and down, and things were moving well. But from 2014 till now, though the Act says that you must run a zero revenue deficit and no more than a 3% fiscal deficit, we have systematically violated the Act for 5 years in a row. What does that mean? Let me put it this way. In a developing country, if the debt ceiling is 3% of GDP, then it is also a responsible government's responsibility to borrow up to that limit. Because we need infrastructure so badly, because infrastructure investments are so fantastically good return on investment projects, it is our duty to borrow to the fullest extent of the law and invest that wisely in roads, in drinking water systems, in hospitals, in ports, and bridges. But in fact, a lady who understood this very well was Ms. Jayalalitha. She started out by saying in 2013 that I'm going to develop for the first time in the history of Tamil Nadu a 10-year vision, an agenda called Vision 2023. She got the World Bank involved, she got the IMF involved, she got different foreign governments involved. And through all of that, she came up with a plan. And a key component of that plan was to say that we are going to increase our rate of investment from the ceiling of 3% that is given in the FRBM or the Tamil Nadu Act called the FRA to 4.5%. I'm going to run such a fantastically good financial administration that we're going to save 1.5% of the revenue as surplus, 1.5% of the GDP as revenue surplus. And so we're going to increase the rate of investment from 3% of GSDP to 4.5% of GSDP. And through that, we're going to grow instead of 7, 8, 9% like the rest of India, we're going to go at 12, 13%. Fantastic plan. In fact, she was trying to accelerate what the DMK had already done. Between 6 and 11, we ran a marginal revenue surplus. And over 5 years, we invested about 3.05% of the GSDP into capital investments and infrastructure. But in fact, from when her trouble started through her passing, we have seen the system deteriorate exactly the opposite of what she said. So back in 16, when I gave my maiden speech on the budget, I pointed out that we were running such high revenue deficits that was crowding out investment. And I said that if you continue down this path, you are going to find in 2 or 3 years that you have not going up from 7, 8% growth, but going down to 5, 6% growth because you're not building enough infrastructure, you're not setting up for enough industrialists and entrepreneurs to come and piggyback on your greenfield investments to run new businesses. My advice was ignored. In 2018-19, the revenue deficit itself was 1.5% of the GSDP, which meant that complete failure of capital investment, instead of the 4.5% envisioned by Ms. Jayalalitha, it came down to 1.5%. And you can imagine that after doing this for 3 years, we have seen growth slow dramatically in Tamil Nadu. How can I say that? In absolute terms, back in 2011, manufacturing used to be 20% of our GSDP. Today, it is 15%. Back in 2011, Tamil Nadu accounted for 11% of India's total manufacturing, as did Gujarat, and Andhra accounted for 6%. Today, Tamil Nadu is down to 9%, Gujarat is up to 13%, and Andhra is up to 8%. So both on an absolute and a relative basis, we have significantly fallen behind from a lack of proper financial administration. The second big problem is a lack of policy or a policy vision or even policy execution. In some cases, policy subversion. I'll give you at a macro level and I'll give you at a micro level some examples. There has been extremely poor management of the water and other environmental resources. Anybody who lives in Tamil Nadu, any part of Tamil Nadu can tell you, the water situation has gotten worse every year. Water bodies are continuously encroached upon. There is no systematic replenishment. Groundwater levels keep receding. We keep talking about this every year. Nothing happens. There is no match between the output of the educational system, the ones that we so proudly talk about, where 1 in 2 college-going boys and girls actually goes to college. The output of those college graduates, there is no match to what the economy needs in terms of employment opportunities. Huge disconnect. One of the weakest points in our system, because we are now throwing up a whole generation of unemployed and underemployed college graduates. It's worse than having them educated, not educated. You have them educated and unemployed. There's a fundamental disconnect between what is needed, what is likely to be impactful, and how it should be done. Again, I don't want to talk politics. I'll just give you 2 examples. In this year's budget, the government of Tamil Nadu proudly proclaimed that it had held a global investors meet at which it had raised commitments for 3 lakh crores worth of investments in the course of 2 or 3 days. In the budget document, it says, these 3 lakh crores, if they all materialize, will result in the creation of 10.5 lakh jobs, 10.45 lakh jobs. How do we know if that's a good idea or a bad idea? 1 paragraph later in the same budget, the government of Tamil Nadu says that the MSME sector is the backbone of our state economy. And in this sector, we have roughly 2.12 lakh crores of capital providing employment to 1.24 crore individuals. Same budget, same government, 1 paragraph later. Anybody with a calculator just goes and does a divide capital by employment opportunity. And you have a stark contrast. The Global Investors Meet requires an investment of 28.75 lakhs for every job to be created. The MSME sector, for every 1.8 lakhs, creates or maintains a job. That is a dramatic, dramatic difference. The government itself, in its own statistics, tells us that. And yet, what do? They say that demonetization was a fantastic idea, never mind that it killed 50,000 businesses and 5 lakh jobs in their own statistics 1 year earlier. And they say the Global Investors Meet is going to be the thing that changes and transforms our economy. We are a state of almost 8 crore people. We have 1-point-something crore young graduates waiting for jobs in the employment exchange and many more that are not listed. How will 10.4 lakhs fundamentally transform the economy? So this is the myopic kind of policy making. It is the path of least resistance, and in some cases, the path of greatest personal rent seeking and remuneration that is leading this kind of policy making. I'll give you a micro example. Every MLA, like me, is given 2.5 crores a year by the government, sanctioned, to invest in what we call constituency development projects. So these may be as small as bore wells, or reverse osmosis plants, or Anganwadis, daycare centers for young children, community centers, laying of roads, things like that. There are some norms, and we are given this money. The average MLA in Tamil Nadu doesn't spend the money. Since I'm in Madurai, I can talk more specifically. My neighbors on all three sides, 2 of them are ministers, and 1 of them is the former mayor of Madurai. Every year, they allocate this 2.5 crores to somewhere between 5 and 6 projects, 50, 60 lakhs each, and that's it. It's easy to do. It probably helps in other ways that I don't want to talk about on stage, and it kind of finishes their obligation. I do about 30 projects a year. I go and find out street by street, block by block, what is needed. I make sure that the fund is applied where it is needed. I make kind of assessments of not just need, but also return on investment or benefit or impact. And then I get that done for just that 2.5 crores. So there is a clear distinction in the level of kind of thought or strategic planning that goes into policy, and that needs to change a lot. So these two are the role of government, elected representatives, bureaucrats, etc. But you all have a much greater role to play, because over and above the problems of the government, we have a very important problem that I want to talk about. We have a failure of culture. We have limitations in the way our society works. Some of these are obvious to all of you. Anybody who has done any business in India, corruption. But corruption comes in many, many, many forms. I just want to make it clear. Corruption is not only about rent seeking in terms of lawmakers or bureaucrats seeking favors for moving papers. Corruption has entered every aspect of society and every level of society. Father Gasper just told us about voters expecting cash for votes. If that is not a form of corruption, I don't know what else it is. So corruption has become kind of embedded into the day-to-day life of our society, and that is a structural problem. I have said this in the assembly. At some level, every single person in Tamil Nadu violates the law almost every single day. It has become part of the culture, this lawlessness. If I go and walk down the street in my constituency to do a site visit or do a ward visit, I will find almost every 5th or 10th house has encroached into the public space in terms of how they're constructed. When the corporation runs water in the morning, you will find that some people put motors and extract. Almost nobody follows the traffic laws. Whichever way you look at it, the nature of our society has become lawless. There is an increasing culture of dependency rather than self-empowerment, and the government encourages this. It's easy for us to say, we'll hand out this dole, that dole, a fan, a mixie, a cow, a goat, and we ask very little in return. And in fact, this kind of profligate spending in many cases, now I'm the first guy to say that not all freebies are bad. I've argued before the 15th Finance Commission that the central government has no right to judge us as a state. We are elected by the people, we'll make our own decisions, and the people will like us or throw us out. But it is a culture that has seeped in through various kinds of decisions of the government, and the people now expect the government will do everything, and they don't need to do anything in many cases. There is a fundamental lack of awareness about the environmental issues and a lack of hygiene in the behavior of people. In many parts of my constituency, it's a 100% urban constituency, I go and do inspections and I get complaints. This place is dirty, it has not been cleaned up, this canal is full of clogged plastic, etc. No problem. We get the government to act, we get equipment, we get volunteers, we get sponsors, we clean it up. In 3 months, the place will be exactly the same again. So it is not that there isn't kind of intent at the higher levels. It is that unless the collective behavior changes to not repeat that, there is no outcome that kind of sustains itself. And over and above all of that, I would say, as a professional myself, the biggest weakness is a kind of sliding work ethic and a lack of professionalism at all levels of the kind of organizational structure. Put it all in, and I'll say, for decades we have had a problem. We have had a problem that there's a glaring shortage of good examples and people to emulate. And there is an abundance of people who have got across the side door, the front door, the left door, the right door, and everybody wants to follow them. So this is where I think you all come in. Of the topics given to me, governance and policies are the government's or elected representative problem. But all over the world and in the history of the world, ideas, global collaboration, and entrepreneurship comes from people like you. Governments cannot do anything but facilitate that. And you need to do it by example. You need to come and provide context, provide opportunity, provide a living example of somebody who can be emulated and followed. Now, I have tried to do my bit. I have had the luxury of a good career, given it up, come back, and I operate on my terms. I say I will not give cash for votes. My leader gave me the great responsibility of starting a new wing called the IT wing. I insisted I would do that only by application, and then toured the whole state myself, held interviews for thousands of candidates, picked people based on their talent, and I spent all my time inculcating that same value system, the culture, the professionalism in that wing, because that is the lasting legacy that I can leave in my party and in my wing for as long as I'm the leader. It is through living that life and giving them that example. That is one small data point in one little party, in one big party, in one little piece of society, which is politics. We need thousands of you to do that. You have done that in your own country. You have done that outside. The Tamil diaspora has got famous examples in every profession, in every part of the world. And we need those examples to come back and operate in Tamil Nadu and provide a framework for the next generation, provide examples for others to follow. If that's what's good for society, what's in it for you? I would probably end with 4 reasons why I think Tamil Nadu is a great place for investment for you. The first, the government of Tamil Nadu itself is a huge buyer of services. The budget is about $28 billion, of which probably discretionary spending is about 50% of that or 40% of that. And the government of Tamil Nadu buys all kinds of things from all kinds of people. There are lots and lots of opportunities. Above that, the government of Tamil Nadu seriously needs a lot of ideas and expertise in things like environmental management. Yesterday I was talking to an old friend of mine, former minister here in Malaysia, was talking about technologies for water purification, technologies for emergency power generation during storms. We have very, very poor systems, things like disaster response. We need a lot of help. And the government can pay for it. Nobody's asking for altruism. The second, at least temporarily, there is a labor arbitrage in Tamil Nadu. There are, on paper at least, educated people at very low working salaries, demands available. Of course, they need training. Of course, they need polishing up. But it's hard for me to think of any other place in the world where you have this level of penetration of college education with this low a wage rate. Third, it is itself a large market. As I said, it is in many ways a middle income or a high income country. And so there are lots and lots of consumers. We are about 80 million population. My best guess is that no more than 15 million of those are, below the kind of purchasing power line. The rest are above it. And so there's a large market, and they have special needs, and people who are Tamil entrepreneurs can adjust to those. Moreover, the market will expand dramatically and the purchasing power will expand dramatically if we get good governance. So if I put that all together, I'd say it is a place that has many low-hanging fruit and has the potential for rich returns for people like you. And precisely because this is a global forum, I would go one step further and say that for the global diaspora, this is a win-win-win kind of a trade as an ex-Wall Street trader. It's a rare trade where everybody involved benefits. Tamil Nadu certainly needs the help, needs your involvement. For you, it is a return to your roots and a contribution back to the society that gave you your start and where you are. And together, I think we can fundamentally transform the lives of millions of people. It is very rare to find a problem of this scale where one can have an impact, which is the lives of 80 million people of a state. So with that, my time is up. I thank you all for the opportunity to come here. I wish you all great success as you network and consider opportunities. On behalf of my party, my leader, myself, we are happy to help in any way we can. We see the value of private enterprise and entrepreneurship. We recognize the crucial need for growth driven by your activities, and we welcome you to Tamil Nadu in any way you choose. Thank you very much.